Why Not a Love Story by Stephen Cooper.
Nance, you want to wait till everybody gets off the,
Okay.
okay.
Why Not a Love Story by Stephen Cooper. The cast of characters are Walter, age 70 to 85, played by Tom Asparas. I pronounced it right all along until now. Asparos. Evie, age 70 to 85, played by Susan Montel.
Go lie down.
As lights come up, we see Evie and Walter walking into the living room. Evie sits on the couch while Walter stands a moment, thinking to himself. Walter speaks.
That was a great dinner. I think the Shanghai Garden has the best So's chicken in town.
Yeah, but that's what you always order. Aren't you bored with that by now?
Not bored at all. I love that dish. Whenever I try other restaurants for General Tso's chicken, they never come up to the Garden's dish.
Well, my favorite is that tofu dish at the Garden, you know, the big dish with the tofu and the veggies. More of a vegetarian.
Yeah, you always stick to the non-meat stuff when we go there or anywhere. Even more, I love this evening with Marge and Howard. We tasted 4 different dishes. That's a treat.
And that's why we like them. They're like us. They're open to sharing, a perfect foursome. It was a really good evening.
So what did you think of Howard's question?
What question?
You don't remember? When he asked that question, you looked a bit startled.
Oh, of course I heard the question and I remember it. I just didn't give it much thought. Actually, I thought it was rather intrusive, a bit too personal.
Well, I didn't think it was intrusive at all. Now, it was more thoughtful and perhaps caring, considering how long we've been seeing each other.
Well, would you ever ask that question?
Never had the opportunity. All the couples we know are actually married. So tell me, what do you think about what Howard asked?
About marriage?
Yes, marriage. Isn't that what we're talking about?
Seems rather unnecessary, at least for people like us, given our stage of life.
What stage is that?
It's very clear that we're in the old age stage of life.
So marriage has no meaning or need? I mean, for old people like us?
Marriage is fine when appropriate. After all, married people don't get divorced when they get to an older stage of life, right? They keep going, don't they?
There are many different meanings to appropriate. When Howard asked, have you ever considered getting married? It started me thinking more actively about things that had been on my mind.
What things?
Well, marriage, for example.
In that case, I would love to hear your thoughts about marriage. Isn't it getting too late for us?
No, perhaps, but why did Howard ask that question? He must have thought that we were acting
like an old married couple.
Walter and Evie laugh.
Well, perhaps, but we're not an old married couple. We've been together a long time, 5 years, I think, and I don't think we're married.
Were you thinking of the marriage question yourself? I mean, even without Howard?
To be honest with you, I'm glad the subject has come up. It opens the door. Perhaps we should talk about it.
Walter, we go out, we travel together, we even go shopping together. We're a couple who likes to be together. We don't need a marriage license to stay the way we are.
Our relationship is a comfortable one. I agree with that. Tell me, what's the difference between marriage and what we're doing? Are we married without the papers, without the ceremony, without the commitment?
Oh, commitment. That's a word I haven't heard in a long time.
First time I woke up and saw you sleeping on the pillow next to me, I felt a commitment.
That was a lovely morning. I thought I'd never feel that way again.
Evie and Walter look at each other for a few moments.
Are we ready to risk that again?
Is commitment a risk? Is marriage really a risk? I know people our age don't normally enter into new commitments.
For good reason, I would say.
What good reason? I haven't heard you point out any problems with marriage among older people like us. And yes, just like us.
Walter, take a moment. Think about what I've gone through. I mean, I've been married for a long time, and yes, my marriage lasted until I was an older person, and then Harry died. And that grief when Harry was dying is something I would not want again or want anyone to go through. And perhaps that's what I think about when the word marriage is said. I can't separate that pain from marriage. I apologize for making that such a strong feeling. So I'm all for marriage, but I haven't considered it again. And it sounds like you've thought about it yourself.
Do you think I'm unaware of what you've gone through? I know that grief. I went through it with Sylvia. I remember the day after Sylvia died, when a neighbor slipped a condolence note under the door. When I looked at it, I spoke out, "Sylvie, we got a note from..." And at that moment, I broke down. I realized that there would be no Sylvie to share a small note. I fell apart at the time. That was an overwhelming grief for me. So I do understand.
Perhaps we are more alike than we know. I remember the morning after Harry died, I went to the kitchen to make coffee as usual, and I made coffee for two. I put 2 cups on a tray in the coffee, and I brought them to the table. At that moment, I realized I would not have breakfast with Harry anymore. And that was the moment that I broke down. Well, like you. So we are the same in some way. I know that downside to marriage.
But is there happiness beyond that grief?
Walter, I don't know about you, but the pain of that loss does last. It's lasted for many years. I'm a bit frightened of going through all that again, caring for someone and then having it simply end.
So one should never risk a good life for fear of pain interfering?
Well, when you put it that way, perhaps one should look at all sides. So why haven't you asked about marriage before? Did it have to be brought up by Howard to get you to talk about it?
Actually, whenever I thought about marriage, I laughed to myself, and I thought that marriage would probably ruin a wonderful relationship. Don't be disturbed at that. I don't really think that. I don't think that marriage is destructive. It's that it would be a change for us, and who knows what change would mean.
What would it mean?
Well, for one thing, when I go home after leaving you off, I always call you when I get home to let you know that I arrived safely. And even though it never happened, I always worry that I would wake you up. I guess that calling back wouldn't be necessary.
Because I worry about you until I hear that you're safely back at your place, but that's not a reason to get married. I hope you agree on that.
Of course, that call is simple, and I love that final call of the evening. I mean, saying good night. I love that last call of the day.
Me too.
So we've solved that little problem. Not that it was a problem. It was something we got used to. And I always wanted you to know that I'm home safely. Then you can sleep without any worries.
Yes, no worries. But I think you have more to say and you can't get it out. Walter, I would love to hear more about your thoughts and, well, not only your thoughts, but your feelings. What are you asking? How would life change? For example, wait, where would we live?
Together, I suppose.
But where?
Well, I haven't planned anything. We could live in our own places.
I don't think that would be like being married. We would have to live together. At least that's my first thought about marriage.
So the idea of marriage has come into your mind before.
I didn't say that. I was speculating. But now that Howard has asked that question, I should think a bit more about things. Yeah. And now that you started this discussion, well, or the discussion was started by Howard, but my thoughts are coming out now. And you know, I never thought about this before. Honestly. Have you thought about the alternative? You always say you like to consider the alternatives to every decision. Now, isn't that your approach?
Of course, I've always said that. As I see it, we could live in one of our places.
Okay, yours or mine.
Something like that, I suppose either one would do, or something new, a place new to both of us.
I had a funny thought.
What could be that funny about this conversation?
Well, I can't believe this came into my mind. It's really a simple question or a simple thought. Where would we go for a honeymoon? We live in Florida. We don't have to escape the snow up north. We're comfortable here. So where?
If that's the biggest problem we would ever face, then there are no problems at all.
So are you proposing?
Well, I'm not sure I'm going that far. I was simply exploring.
The possibilities?
Yes, the possibilities for people like us to do something unexpected.
Well, it wasn't an unexpected idea for Howard, and Marge seemed to nod in some agreement, or at least smile in agreement. He was more outspoken.
How long have we known the Gordons?
Ah, the Gordons. Oh, I remember. I knew Marge before I knew Howard. We were both volunteers at the library, and then we met as couples. So it's been about 6 years, maybe 5.
That's long enough for them to know us. I think they, or at least Howard, thinks we're meant for each other.
Well, how sweet of him.
No, not sweet. Rather more thoughtful for people in our age bracket.
Is he a matchmaker?
Not really. I mean, we knew each other before meeting as couples, or me even meeting Howard.
So is marriage a good idea?
For us, I guess there are some positives.
Like?
Well, if we had only one place rather than two, yours and mine, we would have quite a saving for both of us.
What? So money is driving the discussion? It's rather Scrooge-like for you?
Honestly, money never came into my thinking, but there is something odd that came into my mind when this question came up. By combining our kitchens, we would have plates for a dinner for 16. Now, that's something we couldn't do now.
My gosh, I would never consider inviting people over for a dinner for 16. You may wish to cook for that, not me.
Yeah, I wouldn't or couldn't do that.
So why?
Why what?
Marriage. Actually, there is. There is one major problem with marriage.
What's that?
You have to really care for the other person. That scares me.
Why?
6 months, as Harry was dying. Very painful. And I don't think I would be able to go through that pain again. When you care for someone in pain or on the verge of death, the time during that period is very painful.
I understand that.
Well, that's the scary part of marriage, at least for me. And I think for you too.
Would you want to be absolved of needing to care?
For you?
Yes.
No, not really. I would care for you if that came up, even if it were painful.
Although I do not want you to experience pain, that feeling is rather comforting, and I think I would feel the same way.
What way?
Feel for you, care for you, as you express feelings for me.
You know, Walter, we've never had this deep a discussion, I think ever.
Well, there's always a first time.
No, I've heard that before.
But there's another thought that came into my mind as we came home.
What thought?
In all the years we've been together, the word love has never come out of our mouths. I think that love has to be part of marriage.
So that word hasn't come out of your mouth or mine either. Is that a problem?
No, not really. I can say it now. I can say that word, love.
Walter puts his arm around Evie and speaks very clearly and deliberately.
Evie, I love you. I love you deeply. And I'm sorry I hadn't said it before.
Thank you, Walter. That is nice to hear. And I can honestly say that I love you the same way. After so many years together, I have come to know you and to really love you.
Well, we've got that out of the way.
Not out of the way, just out in the open, where we were both afraid to see it or say it.
Does that make it easier to look at Howard's question?
Oh, well, I'm not sure easier, perhaps more realistic.
So,
So what?
are you proposing?
I may be old fashioned, but I never thought that women proposed, except maybe on what, Sadie Hawkins Day.
You're so right.
Are you proposing?
Yes, without hesitation. And at least I don't have to ask your father for permission, which I had to do when I proposed to Sylvia. She wanted me to do the old-fashioned thing, ask her father for her hand in marriage.
Does that mean we can't get married?
That's no barrier for me. I am proposing.
Well, I accept.
Should I get a bride's magazine to get the timing right for planning a wedding?
That won't be necessary. I think we should elope.
Oh, I love the idea. But we have to have someone to elope from. I mean, isn't that the way it's done? When would you like to elope?
Well, whenever you have time off.
I always have time off. After all, I'm retired.
Me too.
But there's one more ceremony that I won't miss, an old-fashioned ceremony.
Walter gets off the couch and kneels in front of Evie. Walter holds Evie's hand.
Will you marry me, Evie?
Of course. And what a surprise.
Walter gets back on the couch next to Evie, puts his arms around her, and kisses her.
Thank you.
No. Thank you for accepting my proposal. It would have been terrible to be turned down at my age.
Walter kisses Evie again. End of play.
Okay, another play.
Steve, do you want to stop recording now?
Yes, I'll stop recording. Stop recording.